Good evening and welcome. We're starting a little bit late. We had technical difficulties, but we're healed and we're working. So thank you for taking time. This is the fifth of 7 presentations for historic preservation in between month. Technically, Iowa's historic preservation is March. Weather-wise and socially, March isn't the greatest time for us to do things. We used to do it in May, but we have graduation, prom, all that stuff. So we're trying April, and so far we've been pretty happy with our turnout. So thank you for coming to see us, and a greeting to the folks at home that are watching on whatever medium they've decided to do. Or if you're watching the rerun for the second and third time, thanks for doing that. My name is Maureen Oxlin. They thrust the gavel of the historic preservation at me a year ago, and here I am. I've thoroughly enjoyed my time, which is 9 years on the Historic Preservation Commission. The purpose of the commission is defined as a volunteer group of people that share information about the city or the county's historic treasures. So that's why we're here tonight. Fire is a particularly interesting topic for me, for no good reason other than fire departments and the beauty of fire itself. If you think about it, why is it fascinating? It keeps you warm, it cooks your food, it gets you in trouble every once in a while, but it's fascinating. The get in the trouble part of it is the bailiwick of the fire department in any place. Fires are memorable. Fires are an opportunity to problem solve like crazy. Think on your feet and do what you have to do. But thankfully, most of the mottos that firefighters live by is safety first, always. Themselves and the public that they protect. So it is my great pleasure to introduce our fire chief, Jesse Coulson, who has been with us about a year. Okay, getting there. So he came from my most favorite place on the planet, Dubuque, Iowa, eastern part of the state. So he knows how to drive on hills in skiddy weather. So this is a good thing out here. Yeah, so the Spencer Fire Department is an interesting story. I would encourage you, if you haven't been to the Heritage Center, that's kind of our behind the scenes repository of some real treasures. They have a lot that's fire related. We have, of course, the fire of I was going to say 1931, that remade the town, made it better, made it stronger, but it was kind of a mess at the time, and it, I'm sure, honed the fire department and what it does. People remember fires. They're tragic, they're exciting, they're extremely dangerous. We didn't lose anybody in the fire here, which is a good thing. So without further ado, let's go back in time for the continuum of the Spencer Fire Department with Fire Chief Jesse Coulson.
Thanks for having me, and again, this was exciting for me to do because being new to the city of Spencer, I got to take a look at the history of our department and some about the city, but mostly about the department and where it was established, how it was established, and where we're at today. So it was exciting. By far, will I have enough time to go through every major event or milestone that the department or the city experienced, but we'll go through some of the ones that I was able to research that I thought were profound and make up who we are today as a department. And there are some people in the room, I feel intimidated now because there are some retired firemen. And what I'd say is fill in the voids wherever you can. I may not get this probably will not get this perfect. We did our best to do some research. Some of the heritage, some of the things that I found in our history, I guess, doing this was trying to compile this stuff. We haven't really done very well of putting all of our history in one spot. So that's one of our focuses and one of our priorities as a department now is that we're gonna focus more on how to secure that history for the department for generations to come. And then when you come and visit us, hopefully from time to time, you can see that history also. So we'll start out real quick. This is just kind of an older picture. I've heard that it's from back in the 60s, back when we had just the two-stall house, the main fire station. So back in the 60s, just a comparison to where we are in 2023. Difference, right? Just the size of the station, the equipment that's out there and available, and we'll go into what staffing looks like today. City of Spencer was established in 1871, and the fire department was established shortly thereafter. What was interesting is, as I was doing some research on these photos, I learned more about what these trucks were and where they were and how they participated in fire suppression throughout the city of Spencer. So I got to take a look. That picture there was this 1932 Laverne fire engine that was in service. I don't have all my dates together or when it went out of service, but it was used actively for many years. On the left side, we'll talk about that other engine too that you can see. So the 1932 Laverne that we found, it was here on that left side of that photo, and then I'll tell you about the one on the right side also. A little more history on the one on the right side. So 1932 Laverne fire engine, that made a lot of the photos that I found as I was going through the history, but I don't want to just bring you one fire engine. There's plenty more to talk about. So that engine somehow did get restored. It was purchased by someone and restored. And then I heard that it was the manufacturer, and they were from up in Minnesota. And they brought it back down kind of as a memorabilia and actually went through some of our parades and came to the department. Actually, Deputy Chief Stover, I believe, said he had drove this one and really enjoyed it too. This was a piece of our history. It got restored, and at this present day, I'm not quite sure where it's at. So some questions are being asked to see where it was or where it is today. It came for a few days here, was on display, and actually made it through one of our parades. But that was one of our active fire trucks in the city of Spencer. Another interesting one, now this is the one that was the other one that was in that first photo. Retired Chief Duncan actually handed over a whole bunch of historical items that were just unique. And as we get digging through these historical items, these are those things we want to preserve for generations to come. We found this certificate of necessity, of war necessity. Anybody remember why we would need something like that? 1942, what was going on? The war, right? So when you had to acquire these larger items or some of these raw materials to build these items, what would you have to do? You'd have to get permission from the government to actually gain access to them. So that truck, and we'll revisit that truck. In 1942, we had the Certificate of War Necessity for the city of Spencer to have a 1932 Rio fire truck delivered to Spencer, Iowa. When you look at that certificate, what's kind of interesting, I never thought of this before, but operator's certificate or operations certified, they only allowed 4,500 miles per year. And then what was that quarterly there? They said 1,800 miles, no more. So there were some stipulations. So this was a 1932 Rio fire truck that was delivered to the city of Spencer, and this was signed in 1942. So we didn't receive that as a new vehicle. We received it as a used fire truck, but it still had to meet the Certificate of War Necessities. Kind of an interesting. Some of these documents that you'll see up here, I do have the originals up front, and we'll be able to take a look at those as we go through. So we go back to that original photo, and then so that engine here, the Rio, was the one on the right side. So that 1932 Rio and that 1932 Laverne was in service together at that fire station. Kind of interesting enough, we found a paycheck, a check stub. Little different than what we'd expect from today when we do work. But kind of we're trying to go through a timeline of things that I could provide for you that I was able to find. So this was 1945, and as far as we can see, that this was a city fireman getting paid $1.50 for their services to the city of Spencer. Piece of our history and where we were. So, back in the day, fire departments had to raise money. We weren't fortunate enough to have a tax base and money just to support us and a budget to support us. We would have to go out into the community and raise money, especially volunteer fire departments. So what they would do is they would have dances to raise money. Sometimes they would do auctions, But from what I understand here is this was a dance. This was a $5 coupon to get you into the dance, get you food, get you drink, get you some entertainment that they had as they went and raised money to provide fire suppression for the city of Spencer. Just one of the ways that they would get the money to sustain what they needed for fire suppression. So 1941, I haven't found pictures, but the original fire station is still standing. I think someone had told me it was on First Avenue. I have not gone to check that. I think the original station was still standing. But in 1941 is when they did build the new station, that two-bay station on Grand Avenue, which we still have today as part of our station. Believe it or not, how many vehicles do you think they fit in that two-stall? There was four. There was four vehicles. And I think there was a fifth, from what I was told, maybe a chief's car or an administrative support vehicle. So they actually had 5 vehicles that they could get in there. Somewhere down the line, someone told me that Chief Duncan had a picture of him kind of crammed up in between 2 fire trucks in that station. I wasn't able to obtain that yet, but we'll be working on that. Just another picture showing the fleet and the services that were offered at that time. Do you think any of those vehicles are still around? No. That 1949 Seagrave ladder truck, and we'll talk a little more about that as we get moving through this. Actually, we'll talk about it right now. That 1949 Seagrave ladder truck was delivered to the city of Spencer. It came in by train, by rail, and it was brand new. We purchased it, and it lived its life here in the city of Spencer. It is still here in the city of Spencer today. We run it from time to time. It is operational except for the pump. Somewhere down the line we did lose some, or we got some freezing that took place, and freezing water and piping doesn't really go well together. So just a little thing on this. What's that? It's kept now at our main station, and if you look at that station there, it would be in that right door. We have it backed in that right door and pulled up back up to where it should be, where the glass door is, so you can see it when you drive by. Little history on that truck, which I think this is cool because as you saw, the 32s, the 1932 vehicles didn't spend their life here. They were used vehicles that ended up showing up in the city of Spencer, and we made good use of them. This one is kind of interesting because in 1949 it did arrive by rail here in Spencer in May of 49, and it came out of Columbus, Ohio. The purchase was for $18,000, $18,751. Today it still has the original engine, so when you start and run this fire engine, it has the original engine that makes it move under its own power, and it still drives under its own power, and we do use it in parades yet today. More interesting about this is this truck served its purpose in the city of Spencer, but to keep it pristine in the way it is, there's a lot of volunteers that are in the city of Spencer today that help to rebuild that motor and find some, can you imagine the treasure hunt that it was to find some of those smaller components to bring this thing back to life and make it operational so we can enjoy it today as a part of our history. But those people worked very hard at that, and they succeeded. And we're very successful at keeping that thing alive for us. So do we use it on fires? Absolutely not. But it did serve its purpose when we had it here in use in the city of Spencer, and it still serves a purpose for us today. So a little bit of a history of leading up to 1931, but I think most people have heard of or heard the stories of that fire in 1931. So we'll talk just a little bit about that, and I'll tell you, it was interesting to me because I understood the impact, and we'll talk a little bit about that as we get towards the end of this section of it. The impact of this fire had ripples across the state, and if not across the nation, because of how it started. And I'll tell you about how it impacted our laws. Does anybody know or ever heard of where or how it started? Anybody want to suggest how? What was, he did it? No, just kidding.
It was my great uncle's storehouse.
All right, so.
The day of the fire.
Sorry, hang on one second. We got the listeners.
The Otto Sr. was my great uncle, and I know that my mother. I'm sorry.
Last name.
Bernstead. I mean, I just assumed everybody knew it was Bernstead's drug where the fire began. I know my mother told me that she and her sister Gretchen were waiting at home to go to their cottage at Okoboji, and they were going to have a little vacation and be gone from that date through the 4th of July when the fire started. And it also was a very, very hot day. Mm-hmm. But the thing that blows my mind about the whole situation is that everybody in town seemed to know who the boy was that dropped the sparkler into the pile that caused the thing. And yet, to this date, and I begged my parents to tell me, and they wouldn't. I mean, talk about a best kept secret. When you have a whole town keep a secret, that's pretty good.
And maybe that was signs of the time, right? That we kind of, that was the way we were as a society back then. It wasn't that we were out telling other people's business or whatever. So, but you're absolutely right. You're right, more right than I am. What I read about it is exactly what you said. Young child was playing with a sparkler in the drugstore, dropped it around some other fireworks, ignited those fireworks to a point where it could not be put out by itself. So these are some pictures that I apologize, I forget the site, but I do on the next slide. Well, actually underneath it's credit to the Weebly.com. Actually put together a nice little pamphlet that has these photos and a lot of that pertinent information that happened throughout that fire. But yeah, so in the drugstore that fire happened. It broke out. Did anybody know what was above the drugstore? Telephone operators. I got you. So telephone operators, you're absolutely correct. The telephone operators were stationed up there for the city of Spencer, and they made the phone calls for everybody. So when they knew there was a fire and there was a need for help, what did they have to do? They had to notify everybody, Milford, Everly, Fostoria, all those other cities to get resources and help to help support us. So those telephone operators sat up there until they could not stand it any longer, reaching out to neighboring communities and begging for help because they realized how significant this fire had already become and what the potential of that fire was. So when they had an opportunity to leave early on, they chose not to because they knew how important it was and how critical it was to stay there and get that information out to get resources coming. It was a devastating fire, multiple blocks, multiple structures that were lost during that time. It was such a large fire, there was resources that were called upon that would be probably unimaginable to most people to try to stop that fire from spreading and consuming more of the town than it already had. Believe it or not, there was a Western Union telegrams that went out requesting, begging for more dynamite because what were they using the dynamite for? Stop the fire. The idea was to create a gap in between structures or components that can burn, stop that so that fire didn't continue to consume a block and keep moving down the block. So the Des Moines newspaper also reported that they sent up 2 Des Moines firefighters, a captain and a firefighting engineer that handled explosives. And what they did is they were flying the dynamite up here to make that fire break, so we could salvage as much of the city as possible. Interesting to me, I haven't heard of dynamite being used in fire suppression, especially in the urban setting. But it was news to me.
Did they use that in Los Angeles?
It's possible. That was probably for other things. Depends on what year it was. As you look through this photo here, the dynamite was needed to isolate the flames. Spencer dry cleaners volunteered to blow up their building to create that fire break. So that's where they put the dynamite, blew up the dry cleaner store to create that fire break to stop that spread of fire so it would not consume any more of the city than it already had. The devastating results were 20 buildings were lost, 500 people were without work, and it was intriguing to me that dynamite was used to actually suppress that fire from becoming any bigger than it already was. Again, I got to give credit to the Weebly site. They had most of this content and summaries, so it made it a one-stop shop for me to get some of this information. But it definitely impacted not only the city of Spencer, it impacted the state of Iowa, and it also impacted the United States as a whole. Anybody know what the results of this fire caused? Besides the damage to the city of Spencer? Banning fireworks. Did that go beyond just the state of Iowa? It impacted other states across the nation. So in 1939, and you'll be able to see these things for yourself if you'd like. This is some of the history that retired Chief Duncan brought to us. 1939, the fire marshal banned the fireworks, or passed a bill prohibiting the use of fireworks except as in supervised displays by capable operators. That fire had such a significant impact that it changed the laws in the state of Iowa and some states across the nation. I believe there's another fire too that was involved with fireworks in another state that also had significant impact too in changing the laws. So just kind of moving through in time as much as I can without taking up too much of your time either. We found a roster from 1997. Maybe somebody will look up there and remember some of the names. Believe it or not, some of those names are still on the roster today. This was a roster for Fly Iowa. Does anybody remember what Fly Iowa was? A promotion across the state? Sure. So Spencer organized this for several years. Is this when they would bring in like the Air National Guard and bring in planes for displays? An air show, for lack of better words? Yeah. I remember that we had those in Dubuque too for a little while, and then they kind of, it fizzled out. That's unfortunate, but it's a part of our history, right? We used to have air shows here. That's kind of interesting. But so we had 38 members on the roster at that time. Those were the members on that roster were the ones who showed up to cover that event and provide fire suppression and support for the Fly Iowa show on June 8th of 97. Anybody see any names they remember up there? They're familiar with? So 35 members back in 97. So we talk about fires and we talk about the other things that we do. Wildland fires is something that we should talk about in the city of Spencer because we are surrounded by a lot of rural land. That potential for wildland fires is greater here than it is in some other parts of the state, especially when you have that flat terrain and the potential for high winds throughout the community. So back in April of 2000, winds whipped over a 200-acre blaze that burnt through rural lands. And some people will ask, okay, that happens, but it's just a field. It burns, right? And then we'll regrow things. We burnt a field a couple weeks ago, and it's already greened up already over by East Leach Park. So that's just the natural case of things, right? Wildland fires happen, let them burn, let them get that underbrush out. Well, what happens when they start creating and changing the environment themselves? They can start creating their own wind and change directions of that. The significance is this: 200 acres bordering a populated community, as you can see in these photos, isn't just grassland that's at risk. It's the whole community's at risk. I really found this photo in the bottom right the most interesting because some didn't realize how close it truly was to the city of Spencer and to the residential neighborhoods. So do we just let grasslands burn? Or do we do our best to control them? We want to control them because look at the impact it would have had. If you take a look at that upper left photo there, you can see where it actually jumped the road and burned down in that little gulch out in towards the highway and some of that divide, the side of the highway there. So that was 200-acre burn. It neighbored the city of Spencer. If it got into the communities and it was such a high, the winds were so high that day, believe it or not, embers from that fire started fires from throughout the city of Spencer. First Avenue, they were putting out spot fires and chasing spot fires throughout the city of Spencer when that fire was taking place. So not only were they battling that blaze and trying to keep it under control, they also came back into the community to control fires like this that were coming in on other structures and threatening the populated part of the city of Spencer. So when we talk wildland fires, there's a significance there. Sometimes you can let them burn. Sometimes you can control them a little bit, or you get some fire breaks in there for them so they burn out and you're done. But if we let them get out of control and we don't manage them well, you can see they can impinge on the community and create something even bigger. So we talk about wildlands, something I was educated on by our Deputy Chief Mark Stover. Did you know that the city of Spencer has over 3,300 acres of wildland? around it. Or within the city limits. So we don't have a perfect circle, right? So within that diameter of the city of Spencer, there are non-city properties that are rural lands. So we have over 3,300 acres of wildland that has a potential for burning. And out of that 3,300 acre, 1,400 acres are owned by the city of Spencer. So when we live in our neighborhoods and we travel around and we see our neighbors and we go for walks, ride bikes, or do whatever we do, sometimes we forget that we have a lot of rural land that's at our back doors. And we have to manage those and take care of them. So just like in 2000, when that wind-driven fire happened out in the county and in the city, we can control it and manage it the best we can. But it's something that we have to consider. In fire suppression, we don't respond to things, we prepare for things. So we try to evaluate threats that are in the community, and this could be a potential threat. So we try to prepare and plan for that. So when we buy things that help with wildland firefighting, it's not that we're fighting wildland fires every day. What we're doing is we're preparing for when that time comes that you need us, and we need to use it. We need to be ready then and not wish we had something. So preparation is a critical part of what we do. When we talk about wildland fires, we also have to consider the fact, and does anybody know what a fire contract is? I'm learning this too in the last few months. A fire contract is a neighboring or an outside agency outside of the city of Spencer that will actually pay the city of Spencer to bring fire suppression to them if they need it. So what that can do, and why would somebody do that? Somebody would ask. Somebody can ask. Why would you do that? Great question. Why would you do that? Because the cost for a fire suppression or fire protection from the city of Spencer can reduce your insurance rates to a point. So it could be cheaper to pay that annual bill for our fire suppression from the city of Spencer than it would be to pay for insurance, for the full insurance for your property. Now, I'm not encouraging everybody to go out and do this. Some it's beneficial, some it may not be beneficial for. But believe it or not, we have 70 rural contracts. That's 70 properties, and this is not just single-family homes. These are farms and larger facilities where you can imagine they're going to stand to benefit the most if they have fire suppression coming from the city of Spencer. We're able to provide just a little more and have more resources, which could reduce your risk for fire loss. So 70 contracts. That was interesting to me as I came in. So it's not just the city of Spencer that we respond to. We're actually working on mapping these out this year to actually see where these properties are and what kind of obstacles or opportunities they can provide us to have a better response to them. So we have to lead into the most recent fire on Grand as we get moving through this. So in 2023, January 2023, we did have another fire on Grand, correct? This fire was different than what happened in 1931. Would you agree? We had different outcomes. Why did we have different outcomes? Anybody want to guess? Equipment? Preparation? How about personnel? Personnel. The greatest resource we have are the people who are going to fight the fire. You can have the greatest piece of equipment sitting there, but it won't turn itself on and it's not going to hook itself to a hydrant. So 3 fire departments were involved in fire suppression tactics for this fire. 22 Spencer firefighters were on scene. 5 businesses were impacted and 8 apartments. Did we lose a block or did we lose a building? 1 building. So when you talk about the difference of fire suppression between in 2023 and 1931, technology, training, and personnel, and somebody said it, preparation. How do you put a dollar amount on preparation? Being prepared for these fires before they happen is the critical part of what fire suppression is all about. So yes, 3 fire departments, 22 firefighters. The firefighters, the equipment, they worked, they did the best. Sometimes things just happen and we're going to lose some, but we did not lose a block. Our equipment was where it should be. Our personnel were trained the way they were supposed to be, and they were given the opportunity to do their work and get this fire under control. So we did end up losing one, but it looks like they're going to do some salvaging of that and keep that facade for us. But we did not lose a block, which is outstanding work. During that fire, as you'll notice, you're going to see that there's two ladder trucks. Do you think Spencer, Iowa has two ladder trucks? No. So we have mutual aid agreements because we all understand we're not all encompassing. We can't put the world out, but we can use each other for resources. So this ladder truck came from another community. Our ladder truck was out front there on Grand Avenue. That ladder truck down the street on the side of the building there actually came from another community to help support us in our fire suppression efforts. Again, we contain this fire to a single building rather than a block or multiple buildings. Working together and having mutual aid agreements with fire departments around us really helps, not just us, but them too, when they need the resources, when we're surrounded. I think all of Clay County is a volunteer, except for Spencer, which is a combination department. So we help each other, we complement each other in time of need, and it paid off. It paid off for the city of Spencer. So I'm going to take you through a little glimpse of what I could find about the fire department and the staffing and the equipment that helps to protect us today. 1941, now mind you, we are a combination department. We're supported and supplemented by a great number of volunteers. So throughout all these years, I'm going to tell you, we had an abundant amount of volunteers that were highly trained and would show up and help to put out these fires too. So in 1941, we had volunteers, plus we had 2 full-time firefighters on staff. That was when the new building opened up. Remember that, the new building on Grand? 1970s, we had a 3rd firefighter, a career firefighter added. We're still supplemented by a greatly trained volunteer firefighters. And then in the 70s, they did add a 4th firefighter position. So what we would do is we would staff that station 24 hours a day, 7 days a week with one person. And in 41, correct me if I'm wrong, they would work 24 on, 24 off, 24 on. So every other day, they were committed to that fire department to keep that equipment up to date, maintained, and where it needs to be in case that fire happens. So they changed to 3 shifts there in 1970s. So we actually had 3 firefighters. So you'd work a day off 2, work a day off 2. Later in the 70s, they came up with a 4th firefighter because sooner or later somebody needs a little time off, a little more than 2 days off. They get a vacation, they get sick or something. So we had a supplemental individual that came in. That was our 4th career firefighter. In 1981, the first full-time fire chief, we still had a volunteer fire chief up until that point. So in 1981, our first full-time career firefighter, which was Stu Mackey, was hired. So now we had the 4 firefighters plus we had the chief. So we had 5 career firefighters in 1981. In 1981, from what I can find from our records, were 89 calls for service in 1981. In 2005, EMS response was added to the fire department. What happened in 2005? I think it was 5. What was replaced right out here? The bridge. So that delayed our response and our capabilities of getting to the south side of town. So to do that, not just for us, but the hospital and the ambulance sending their crews out and around, what we would do is staff an engine on the south side of town, and we would respond to EMS calls. So when a call for service came in, not only were you just sitting and waiting for an ambulance, you would have an engine, a staffed engine, and personnel coming to you to render aid before that ambulance got there to help fill that gap of time. So 2005, we started seeing fire engines going to EMS calls. Some might ask, why did fire engines go to EMS calls? Anybody want to ask that? I can't answer it if you don't ask.
Why did the fire trucks go to EMS call?
Great question. Great question. Because firefighters are staffed and around all day long too. And they can have that quicker time and that quicker response. They're trained in medical care also. And if we can get you medical care in a shorter amount of time, what's your chance of survival if you're experiencing a medical emergency or a trauma? It increases that chance of survival. So if we can get you firefighters that are trained in medical care, that makes sense. So 2005, we started providing that first response medical care to the citizens of Spencer. 2006, our addition was built. We added 5 bays. We added more equipment. And remember where we were in 1981 at 89 calls? Look where we're at in 2006. We're up to 327 calls. We added the station. We're back in service. They closed that station south of town because the bridge was reopened and we had a bigger facility. Bigger facility, more equipment. 2008, deputy chief position was added. But when that was added, it's not that we continued to have 5 people. We still only had 5 people. The deputy chief was that 4th firefighter, just his responsibilities expanded. And so did his title, his job title. So we're still at only 5 firefighters, including your chief. And then we had 361 calls in 2008. 305 of those were fire, and 56 of those were EMS calls. So we're starting to see a trend of numbers as we go through here. They're not going down, are they? Calls for service. 2018 staff. 2018, we had an agreement with the city or Spencer hospitals to help supplement EMS responses because for whatever reason, I wasn't here then, so I don't want to assume the reason. All I know is that we signed an agreement to help supplement EMS response and transport. So not only were our firefighters running out the door when there was a cardiac arrest, a car accident, or a trauma, they would also now start going out the door with an ambulance. So Spencer Hospital staffing an ambulance, if a second call comes in the city of Spencer, you think that's likely? It can happen. We still expect or want an ambulance to be there for us. So we started staffing that ambulance. It's a Spencer Hospital ambulance. We use our members to staff it, care and transport patients to the hospital, and then get back in service. So we were able to staff that second ambulance for Spencer Hospital. Our call volume grows to 572 calls a year. 236 are fire, 336 calls for service, and that includes transports and first response for our community. Oop, missed the most important one. Last year's total, 724 calls, 287 fires, 437 EMS calls, to include transports and first response with our fire engines. So I'll just take a snapshot here at a 5-year glimpse. Sometimes we want to see, what does that mean? How does that relate? So 5 years, so we go back to 2018. At 2018, we had a total call volume of 572 calls. And 5 years later, we had 724 calls. It was almost a 27% increase in call volume for the fire department. That included EMS from 2018 to 2023. That was over 30% increase in EMS calls for the fire department. And then other calls could be fires, motor vehicle accidents, fluid spills, chemical odors, things like that. That jumped over 21%. So no red there. Right? Everything green. Call volume moving up over a 5-year time frame. 1981, we take a snapshot of that. We had 89 calls, 5 career members. At that point, we had 5 apparatus to maintain, so that career member, their main responsibility is to make sure all that great equipment we have works. It starts, if we had SCBAs, make sure that the air bottles are filled up, the oil's in there, the gas is in there, the small motors are running. So they're all day long, they're making sure this equipment is ready. If that call comes in, then we can bring our volunteers in, supplement that career member, and get them out the door with reliable equipment. And then in 1981, remember, we only had 2 bays. 2003, we take a look at calls. We had 287 fire, still had only 5 career, plus supplemented by our volunteer staff. We grew to 11 apparatus at that point. We have 7 bays instead of 2 now to maintain of equipment. EMS is at 437 calls with the same staffing, the 5 career, and plus supplemented by our volunteers. And then we also added, although it is Spencer Hospital's ambulance, it is in our station, and if we need to tend to it, we will. If we take it for a call and bring it back, we make sure it's where it needs to be and equipment supplied. So really, when you take a look at 2023, we had 724 calls with 5 members supplemented by volunteer staff. We had 12 pieces of equipment to maintain and make sure that they're in working order. And we had 7 bays A little bit of a difference from 81. Do you want to guess what those numbers are, the comparison between 23 and 81? Obviously, everything went up, right? So in that time frame, our call volume went up over 700%. Our staffing remains the same.
What was the difference in volunteers from volunteers?
I don't have a good tracking of what our roster looks like because it was fluid. You know, some people could come, more people could come, and then, you know, life happens and then they can't bring their time in. All I know for sure is that we were supplemented by highly trained volunteers that would show up on a weekly basis to be prepared. That number and that roster was fluid, so I don't have precise numbers for you. I do know we have a roster that shows about 40 positions right now, and that includes everybody. That we have that available.
Does this percentage, why is the percentage going up? Is it being more people, or is it population, or?
Good question. Why is it going up? Population, needs for service. More technical things are happening. More people have vehicles, rates of speed, more mechanical things around the house, more people out in their yards working with power tools. There's just, it's hard to put your finger on one, but the one for sure is going to be EMS, and that calls for medical care. That one is just, that's a national trend. That's not just the city of Spencer. That's a national trend. EMS is skyrocketing wherever you go. The call volume, we're unsure how to even manage this yet and where to go with it, because then, just like any other career, we struggle with the workforce too. How do we get people in there to fill that need? Because it is just skyrocketing. But EMS is the main driver of that. Good questions? So I just go across the bottom there, everything in green, almost 714% increase in calls, no increase in staffing. We do have 140% increase in equipment and tools and supplies to maintain and keep operational for that 2 o'clock in the morning call that may come, or the structure fire that we responded to today. And then we also have 7 bays, so we got 7 more bays. More bays means more equipment, right? They're not 5 empty bays. There's 7 full bays of equipment.
I'm just wondering why we don't have more full-time firefighters. You know darn well that people wouldn't mind paying a little bit more tax, because that's a security issue.
Absolutely, but it takes education. You can't just come out and say, I want more, right? We need to first understand what that need is and what's the best the fiscally responsible way to manage that. And right now, we're taking a look at that. And how else do you look at it except for actually looking at the numbers? And instead of just, coming in and grandstanding, I want more, it's why. Explain to me why. And hopefully this helps tell that story for all of us in the community of what services are provided to you and why they're being provided to you the way they are.
How do we compare as far as the 5 career with other cities of the same size?
That's a good question. I don't have an answer for you, too. But I have been in communication with this community similar size and their chief. They have a little more staffing, not much more than ours, but they also maintain EMS transport. So they're the only EMS transport in their area. So then that helps complement their staffing. So it's not that they have more firefighters. They have more responsibility yet, and they've expanded their workforce because of it.
5 people can't drive 12 trucks.
What's that?
5 people can't drive 12 trucks. So if they're the only ones that show up, you're not going to have enough equipment.
Correct. So 5 people, you can't just have 5 people driving trucks. You got to have some people go in and do the dirty work, right? I agree. So the 5 of us, when we respond, we'll get the equipment there, but we get in and do the dirty work too. But remember, we only have 1 member on 24 hours a day, and then the deputy chief and the chief, we work Monday through Friday, whatever those hours may be, 6:30 or 7 o'clock at night, to help inform and be a part of the community. So we're really, tonight, after 5, we'll only have 1 member on scene or in the station tonight, supplemented by the highly trained volunteer roster that we do keep. So again, just showing comparables of where we're at, and numbers mean something because they help us make informed decisions about where we go from here, rather than emotional responses to things. So our fleet today, The city has provided us with some good stuff. We're looking to make sure that it remains that way, and we're getting support from the city on that. And you will be the first group that gets a snapshot of what the two new pieces of equipment are that the city approved, the city council approved. I have some pictures of what we're looking to order, and they're a 32-month out purchase, but you'll get a chance to take a look at them tonight. They'll be the first time that we put them out to anybody. So right now we do have 2 fire engines. That's what you're going to see, 93 and 94. One is a frontline engine. That engine responds to all fire and all EMS calls in the city of Spencer when they're dispatched. Now what they have on 93 is almost anything you could find outside of medications that an ambulance would have. We have a first response bag. We have medical care supplies there. We have a Lucas device, which is an automated CPR device that does precision compressions for somebody that's in cardiac arrest. All of that equipment is staged on 993, so when they respond and get to the scene, maybe before the ambulance, if the ambulance is tied up, we can now render aid to somebody quicker. Oxygen, masks, bag valve masks, things like that. We carry those supplies. So for the city, you can imagine like any other mechanical device, there's a chance for a flat tire or a repair. So to keep our ISO rating where it is and just to be responsible, we do have 2 engines. What we'll do is, our goal is, an engine is only good for about 20 years. But you can't run it for 20 years. You run it for 20 years, it's going to be dead long before 20 years. So what we're going to do is we rotate ours out. So 94 is an 08 and 93 is a 2015. So our goal will be every 10 years to rotate these engines out so we can prolong that life of that engine and actually get a full 20 years of it. As you can see, our call volume's increasing. The miles are happening greater on these rigs. We want to make sure they're operational when you call or if you need us. So we have 2 engines. We have a rescue unit now. That's a dry rescue unit for motor vehicle accidents. We have the extrication, the jaws of life, those traditional things that you would envision seeing at a vehicle accident scene where you got to open a car up. And then we do have the 75-foot aerial or ladder truck that we have in service now. That's a 2001 and is in need of replacement. It's just, it takes its toll. It's a lot of weight running in and out of those doors, and over 20 years, doesn't matter what the miles are, they're not going to be as responsive as they should be after that 20-year mark. Or you're going to spend a lot of money in rehabbing them too. And then we also have what you can see over here off to the right of the screen. That is a tanker. So most of these, the engines are carrying 1,000 gallons of water. SMU does a great job getting hydrants out in the community for us. So we don't have to bring a lot of water with us because wherever we look, we're going to probably find a hydrant in the city of Spencer. But now sometimes we get to some areas, not all areas have that hydrant accessible in the city yet. And remember, we have rural contracts. We have communities that don't have a water supply system like we do. So in 992, which you'll see to the right side by itself, is a 2,000-gallon tanker. Now that can pump water, but it can also draft water and dump water, and it has a 2,000-gallon collapsible tank. So what will happen is if we're in mutual aid with somebody, if Astoria needs us, and they're out in a rural area and there's no water supply there, we can bring 992, our tanker, to them. We can set up our collapsible tank and dump our 2,000 gallons of water in, and then we can go to another water source, refill, and bring that 2,000 gallons back. And what we'll do is we'll work together as a team to keep shuttling that water in and out until we get fire suppression. And there are some places in the city, it's just not feasible to have every place with a hydrant. So having a hydrant, even in the city, we can use 992. It's a great resource for us. Now that piece of equipment in the ladder truck, those 2 pieces of equipment are about 20-year pieces. They run not as frequent as you can imagine those engines do. So they can last us 20 years really easy. So a purchase on one of those items, you won't see a replacement for that for about 20 years. The engine, you will see a replacement about every 10 years, so we can rotate that through. We also have a UTV. Some ask, why do we have a UTV? It's not for fun in those nice days. It is for getting to those remote areas. I think I have some pictures, and I can't remember. We've been putting them on our Facebook page recently. We've been involved in some of the burns. But remember, in 2000, when we had all those acres burned just west of town, these are great pieces of equipment to get into those remote fields without getting a 40,000-pound fire engine stuck and making our people carry hundreds of pounds worth of gear over uneven ground to get back there to spray some water just to walk all the way back. This piece of equipment is an integral part of fire suppression. Not even that. Think of this. We have 18 miles of remote trails. So if you're having that leisurely walk or bike ride or something like that and you were injured in that remote area, we're not going to run a 40,000-pound piece of equipment or an ambulance probably down those trails. We're going to be using this piece of equipment to help get to you and render aid to you in a timely fashion. We do have a brush truck too. Brush truck is, again, they work in tandem. That brush truck tows that UTV to where it needs to be. That brush truck is much lighter than a fire engine down there on the bottom. That carries, I think it was about 300 gallons of water, right? And then the UTV can come back and top off from that truck and run back out and help extinguish that fire. So they work in tandem. They're critical parts of what we do. It's also a tow vehicle for us. So for instance, boat, anything out on the water and we got to tow the boat, it's a great tow vehicle for us too to get our equipment where it needs to be as quick as possible and when you need us. The only other two pieces of equipment you're not seeing there is going to be the chief's vehicle, which is my Tahoe, and then the deputy chief's vehicle, which is a 2022 3/4 ton. The cool part about that is, for me, might not be cool to you. I come to you as a paramedic and have operated as a paramedic for over 20 years now. I don't want to not be able to use my skills to help you. So if EMS is increasing and our resources are not following suit, what happens when an ambulance is out? What happens when 2 ambulances are out? Now, if Mark Stover, Deputy Chief Stover, and myself, Deputy Chief Stover is an advanced EMT, so he can even start IVs and do frontline cardiac meds and some medications. We can operate both at that level out of our own vehicles. So if resources are out, or I can get to you quicker than that engine can get staff on it, or that quicker than that ambulance can come, I'll respond to medical calls first and be able to render aid. I carry oxygen and devices like that for cardiac arrest, AED, and things like that. So those two pieces of equipment are not on here, but they're very important to what we do in our operations. It expanded our operation. It doubled our capabilities of responding to EMS calls because both him and I can now respond from wherever we're at for an EMS call or need for service in town. And the infamous or famous or the 1949 Seagrave is still in service. It is sitting in that south door. We're going to look at ways to kind of brighten that up and bring attention to that in that door. And there's a lot of history to that, so I kind of like the idea of advertising that history and maybe putting some billboards up on it about where it was or where it came from and what it's done for our community. It's a great piece of history. Not only has it lived its life here, but to get it back to where it's at in an operational order, it was all due to the input of the city and citizens of Spencer to get that back on the road. So there's more history to it than just it showing up here. And like I said, we are Spencer Fire Rescue, which you will see everywhere. But we're also Spencer Fire Rescue and EMS. Although we don't advertise that in that fashion, we do house an ambulance for Spencer Hospital in our station. And when there's not an ambulance available for the citizens of Spencer, we do staff that one and make it available to the citizens as needed. And we will transport as needed for your needs. Now, Spencer Fire does a whole bunch of stuff. Just in quick summary, obviously we're fire suppression. You can see the structure fires there. We do EMS. We respond to motor vehicle accidents and do extrication as needed. We do specialized training in compressed gas fire suppression, so any tanks, propane tanks, things like that. And one of the things we pride ourselves the most on is up in that top left-hand corner, and I should probably dedicate a slide just to that. We love public education and the relationship that we build with our citizens. We spend hours, countless hours. We've been working on tallying the hours that we spend for fire prevention and public and PR stuff, pub ed and prevention stuff. So this was Spencer Reeds. This was one of our firefighters. What you didn't see in that photo out in front of them was probably about 20 young children watching that firefighter read to them. Training is a critical part of what we do. To be good at what you do, you don't wake up one morning and hope not to use it. You wake up every day and you train. That's how you're proficient when you call and you need us. That's how we are proficient. So we spend a lot of hours training up north. When I first got on, we actually gained access to the restaurant where Quick Trip is going in, and we got to go in and do some training. They had a sprinkler system in there that we were able to pump and practice that, because we asked people to put sprinkler systems in, put tens of thousands of dollars worth of fire suppression in. We should know how to use them. So we pumped that sprinkler system. We got up on the roof, and we were able to practice cutting holes and vent holes up there. We were able to breach walls and do a lot of things that you just can't do unless you have a structure fire. So training is a priority to us. Not only is training a priority to us, it's a priority. If you look there where you can kind of see the Fostoria coat there, we did a joint training effort out at CF Industries. We brought, or Fostoria was invited out, Spencer Fire was invited out, and we mocked up a scenario of someone that there might have been a release. How could we manage that scene? Because that is one of our contracted businesses that we respond to. So we bring other outside agencies in, and they bring us in and do training for us too. In the summer months, they do a water shuttle, they'll call it, and they'll bring the tankers in and how to fill them up and drop them off and fill them up and drop them off and just keeping that circle. They're really good at it because we're spoiled. I don't say spoiled, but I'll say spoiled with the idea that we have a good water supply system in the city of Spencer. They don't, so they have to be good at that. So we'll bring them into the city of Spencer, and we'll all work together to see how well we can get at it too, because they need us and we need them. So training together, not just in our department. The upper middle picture is actually us out at CF Industries. That's a CF Industry representative, a couple of them. With us, we're all working together, doing that mock scenario. If there was an anhydrous or ammonia leak there, how would we mitigate that and keep the community and citizens as safe as possible? Again, PR, parades, we love that stuff. We're proud of being able to be a part of the city of Spencer, and we show it in our commitment to that. And not only do we get into fire suppression and extrication, we get into some specialized rescue things also. On the 9th of this month, I think it was, we did our annual refresher for hazmat operations level training. All our firefighters that go through Firefighter 1 get a hazardous materials training up to the operations level, and they can get in suits and help mitigate scenes or decon areas or put containment out where it would be needed. So we went through that training not too long ago. If you really look at it, we are an all hazards department. We'll respond. There's not a call that will say, no, sorry, we don't do that, and hang up on you. We're going to come. We're going to help you figure out a problem. Even if we don't know how, we'll know somebody. We'll find somebody that will help us resolve that problem. Kind of interesting part here, just so you know, we got talking about confined space stuff. That's another specialized training. SMU and Public Works, we're all kind of talking about it because they have to be in those environments, and we're like, how do you respond to that? What happens if something goes wrong? So we kind of identified the fact that we needed more training on that. So the Iowa Fire Service Training Bureau is coming in September, and we're going to train our members up to that operations level of confined space rescue, identify what our capabilities are, and then provide that response to the community as needed. We'll see what our needs are, our equipment are. So we're going to expand even more than what we're doing today. So in summary, we still have 5 career members today. Right now we have 24 volunteers. We had 2 more interviewed, so we're going to be up to 31 members as soon as we get these 2 through that process. That's exciting because it's been some time since we were over 30 members. And then I also got another application the other day, so there's a strong potential we could be at 32 members here in a very short period of time, which is exciting. Recently, again, it's a department. We operate not under my watch, we operate together. This is our department. So most recently, which was exciting for me, is we did a values assessment as a department. Instead of me telling you what your values are, we went through the department and did an exercise on a training night to see what the department wanted for values. So they came and put it all out there. One person would sit down and have 10 cards in front of them and put their values on those cards. You get into a smaller group and you say, okay, you can only have 5 values out of that group. So they together as a collective decide what comes out of that. When we came down to it, these are not the values that I set out for the fire department. These are the values the department decided on. These are the things that we value. And it is integrity, courage, loyalty, and service to our community, which is you. We are in the process right now. We're actually in the fine-tuning phases of creating a new mission statement based around our values. Again, our department is voting on that tonight as we speak. They had their business meeting. We got it whittled down to about 2 different mission statements that incorporate our values. So be looking for that very soon. It's a great foundation. A mission statement and values is a great foundation to say, why do we do what we do? Go back to your values. Go back to your mission statement. Does it meet that? And then that can be our guiding principles behind our response and the way we handle emergencies and ourselves in the community as a whole. This was our most recent group photo with our fleet in the back. We tried to do it about every 5 years. And this was the most recent one. I was fortunate enough, I missed the photo, but I was able to squeeze in and get a solo shot there to get into the main photo and be a part of the history of this department and the city. So excited to be here. I enjoyed this. Like I said, this was a benefit to me too, to do the research. If you want questions, I'm going to take go ahead.
In Hawaii, they opened up the hydrant and they were dry. What prevents our system from going dry?
A great, robust utility company called SMU. They supply our system. So we count on their expertise. Just like we don't want them to put out fires, they don't want us to mess with their hydrants unless we need them. They do a great job supplying that for us. So not only that, if there's areas of opportunity, they identify that and share that with us too, right? Maybe that's a dead-end hydrant that doesn't have the pressure that is optimal. They share that information. We're engaged. We have an app right now that we both work in and out of called Flow MSP that identifies the flow rates and everything of the hydrants that we have in town.
I met you shortly after you got here, and I detected that you were very passionate and you were putting in 1,000%. And I still, today, just with this lecture, I just sense that you're just putting in all the effort you can, and I feel real comfortable as being a citizen. And I want to thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate that. But again, it's not me. It's the department. It's us as a whole. We operate. There's not one thing I've done here that I couldn't have done without the support of the department or the department members. So as a whole, you have a great department here in the city of Spencer. You have very committed and devoted individuals that volunteer their time to go into harm's way to render aid to you in time of need. That is a great thing to have. So you'll be the first to see. So if you were paying attention to city council meeting, when you ask for a volume of money that I asked for, it doesn't come fast and easy, right? It's thought out. It's got to have a lot of rational thought behind it and explanation, and that's my responsibility. So I asked the citizens and I asked city council for a large amount of money, but we are in need of equipment to be ready for you in time of need. It's not the fire you want to go get the good equipment. It's before the fire. You want to train and be ready to use that equipment. So if you need us, we can come and be effective response force to you. So, go ahead, Jeff, question.
You talk about training. There is a reasonably new facility just outside of town. Is that of use to you?
I would say 50% of the training that I've been involved with the department has been out there. Doesn't mean that has to be the only place we train. And we also have to get an understanding because there's governing rules about that facility. When you do live fires, you can't just go out there and grab a stack of papers and pallets and burn. There's stipulations and guidelines that we have to follow for our safety. Believe it or not, there's firefighters that have died in training fires, and we just never want to see that happen. So we have to make sure we're where we need to be before we ever burn out there, because it is a live fire training center. But we've been out there for fire suppression tactics, search, rescues, hose pulls, flowing water. We still use that facility. But if we get the opportunity to get into a structure that might be coming down next week and we can do things we can't do there, we're going to take advantage of that too. But yes, that's a great facility out there, and we're going to learn more how to use that effectively for our training. Good question. So what I asked you for, I'm assuming most, if not all, are citizens. What I've asked you for and the city council for was the purchase of a ladder truck and a new fire engine. We're in need of an engine, and our ladder truck is in need of replacement too. So that's not a cheap feat. Most people haven't seen this outside of the department, but I just wanted to share with you tonight what the city council approved us for. What we have today is a 75-foot ladder with no platform. That means if we had to perform rescues, we're going to go up and tell you to walk down the ladder. So what we did is we looked at about 5 vendors, and with those vendors, obviously, if we're looking for 2 pieces of equipment, that vendor that can offer both is going to give us the best deal. But we went and we sought this out from different vendors because we wanted to make sure we understand these are 20-year purchases. And if it's a 20-year purchase, we want to do it right the first time. There's no room for error on this. So one of the vendors that came in is Pierce Manufacturing, which is under the umbrella of Oshkosh Corporation, which is a global corporation, builds military contracts and fire equipment for all over the world. When they came in, they had their bid. What was interesting about them is the ladder truck that we were looking at. Most ladder trucks that are 100 foot or more need a tandem axle. They designed one with a single axle, which is more maneuverable, get into tighter areas, and easier driving for our drivers. So what we did is we took a look at their Ascendant. That's 110 foot reach with a platform. So it does have a nozzle at the tip. It has a platform that can accommodate 3 firefighters. It can accommodate rescues and pickoffs and things like that. So that's a 110-foot ladder truck with a platform. Much better than what we have, and we're going to get more use out of this for a more responsible spending. You do the tandem axle 100-foot heavy-duty steel ladders, you're almost $750,000 to $1 million more than what this fire truck would cost us. So this suits our needs. This meets our needs and wants as we look forward to the future of the city of Spencer and growth. Sometimes people say, well, why do you need 110 foot? Ain't nothing in here that's 110 foot in the city of Spencer. But what do we have? So the big flat roofs. Big flat roofs. So in the fire industry, they'll call them high rise, right? That's your big buildings. So we also call them wide rise. Menards, Walmart, strip malls, those big footprint buildings, these pieces of equipment can reach into and get water on fires more efficiently than if you had a smaller size ladder. So that is a Pierce Ascendant. Let me see if I can just go side to side. I don't think I can. I'll show you one more. So this is built in Appleton, Wisconsin. This is the same, this went to a different city, same truck, same style, same everything, 110-foot Pierce Ascendant, and with that platform on it. That is what we signed a contract to purchase for the city of Spencer. The only disappointing part about this is with supply chain stuff, 42 months. 42 months, 42 months. And we're gonna be lucky. I'm probably pushing 42 months to get that. So it's going to take some time. We'll get there. We'll make do with what we have and get you the best response possible with what we have as we keep it maintained and operational and mission ready for you. And then our engine we're looking at is a rescue pumper. It's from Pierce Manufacturing also, so Pierce will be supplying both of them. When you buy 2 pieces of equipment from the same manufacturer, again, you're going to get the best bang for your buck because they want the purchase too. These are big purchases. This vehicle is actually going to be a rescue pumper. Remember that small rescue that I showed you, that dry rescue is that Ford rescue truck? We're going to combine the equipment in that rescue truck into this engine. This will actually have top storage. We're going to maximize our storage capability. So instead of 5 people in the rescue and 6 people in the engine to go to a car fire, we can get 6 people to bring all that same equipment to you when you need it. So much more efficient response force. That's our goal. Get to you quicker and get more resources to you in a faster time. So you're the first ones to get a glimpse, unless anybody in here has been cruising the Pierce website like I do. You'll be the first one to get a glimpse of what we have to look forward to. This pumper, 32 months. We'll be 32 months on this. So it'll be some time, but it's coming. We're moving forward, and I say thank you for your support.
Chief, out of curiosity, where do fire trucks go to the next gig? Where do they die?
Good question. Auction site. If you, and that's where they go. So our last fire engine that we sold, I think it was a 91. It was still in service. We sold that on auction for about $6,000, and a gentleman from south of Iowa City drove up. And I says, hey, once he got here, I gave him the key, showed him around. I says, hey, what department is this going? It's not going to a department. This is mine. He bought it for himself. It was a toy. But when you get so far out of service, when you get beyond that 20-year mark, most departments, and unless most departments are going to not want that because they understand the liability that's behind that piece of equipment. Now, there are some departments that just can't afford anything else, and you'll see them get some of those older units, but maybe their call volume isn't as great as others, and that's just what they can afford. It's still better than nothing, but yeah, you can find fields of old fire trucks in some parts of the state. Question?
This question's a little more off the wall than the last one, but I'm betting that most people in this room don't understand the single obligation of a community, a city, is to provide fire protection, not police protection, not roads, not schools. It's kind of interesting.
That's a great statement, and if you've been reading our fine newspaper lately, EMS falls into that category. We don't have to provide that service. That's not an essential service, and that's not just in Iowa. We'll see that across the country too. But we're evolving. We're all evolving. We're identifying that need in our communities more and more, and as we identify it, then it's gonna cost, right? To provide a service and to have that service ready for you, it's gonna cost money. And that's always been that juggling act. How much are we willing to spend to have that preparation in time of need? And that's a discussion for all citizens in all communities across this nation. In our profession, we see it on a regular basis on news feeds and things like that. EMS it's a struggle across our country. They are giving money hand over fist to people. I see a $10,000 signing bonus, and I'll tell you what. You wouldn't even have to give me 10 grand to go back to Florida. But they're $10,000 signing bonuses to be a paramedic down in Florida because they're in such dire need. So it's not just us. It's just part of society right now. Something we got to look at and consider.
What's the price tag of those two?
You're going to have to read into the city council minutes. I'm not going to share that. I will tell you right now, the ladder truck is going to be over $1.5 million, and that engine there is going to be over $1 million. And I'll tell you what, May 1, 1.25% increase if we didn't sign into a contract. So where they used to do quarterly or once a year increases in these builds, they're doing them quarterly now to keep up.
So you would take a check for that, right? You would take a check for that, right?
Do you live in the city of Spencer? You're speaking to the city of Spencer. No, but we can just sign and lock that price today, and that's what we were fortunate enough with, that the city council provided us that opportunity, and you again, you are our customers. You're the ones that allow us. You're our customers and our employers. You're the ones who allow us to provide this service to you. So we'll do our best to get you the best service possible for what we can do.
There was a fire in the city today where 3 people were trapped in a burning building. They put the ladder up. A fireman had to come up, take the person, carry him down, go up, carry him down, go up. If they had that, they wouldn't have had to do that.
That's correct. So the basket will give us much easier opportunities to render aid and get people out of those risky situations faster.
Chief, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
This is wonderful. Just a word about community stuff. The Clay Heritage has some really interesting equipment. Yes, and I'm probably using the wrong terminology, but turnout gear and tools. If this was fun, and it was, put it on your list to stop down there. Open from 10 to 4 Monday through Friday, 10 to 2 on Saturday. Again, thank you, Chief. Just a word of what's coming up. We planned this. There's a story behind it. We skip next Tuesday. Our next presentation is on Thursday, April 25th. It is the history of Spencer Municipal Utilities. And as you can well imagine, fire service and having water coming through pipes are related. And volunteer fire department existed before we had water. The interesting story is we've got water now. We can disband the fire department. This was in 1890. How things change over time. So see you next Thursday. If you're at home, tune in again or come down and party with us down here at City Council chambers. Thank you all for attending.